May 7, 1945, the impossible request. The war in Europe was collapsing. German forces were fragmenting. Adolf Hitler was dead. Berlin was falling. And at Third Army's command post in southern Germany, something extraordinary was unfolding, something that defied every military convention. An operations officer rushed into the headquarters, visibly shaken. "Sir, we have a situation." General Hobart Gay, the commanding general's chief of staff, looked up from his battle maps. "What situation?" "A German infantry battalion, roughly 800 soldiers fully equipped, has surrendered." "Then process them," Gay replied. "What's the problem?" "Sir, they refused to surrender to us." Gay's eyes narrowed. "Refused? They're the ones laying down their weapons." "Yes, sir, but they're insisting on one condition. They'll only surrender to General George S. Patton. By name, no one else." The chief of staff set down his papers slowly. In 20 years of military service, he'd never heard of such a thing. "And you're certain about this?" "Absolutely certain, sir. There have been 4 separate units today making the same demand. A rifle company this morning, a regiment this afternoon, and now this battalion. All walking past other American positions to reach our lines. All asking where Patton was. All refusing to surrender to junior officers." Gay picked up the telephone. "Get me General Patton immediately." When the general came on the line, Gay explained the situation. Surrender requests, yes, but exclusively for Patton. Nothing else would do. There was silence on the other end. Then came Patton's response, words that would echo through military history. "Well, I'll be damned. Even the Germans have standards." Understanding the reputation. By May 1945, George S. Patton was a legend on both sides of the battlefield. German military intelligence maintained extensive files on him. Not out of casual interest. They had tracked him since North Africa, recognizing him as perhaps the most dangerous American field commander in Europe. German soldiers had their own name for him, Blutiger Patton ***, Bloody Patton, not because of cruelty toward prisoners, but because of his devastating effectiveness in combat. He annihilated enemy formations. He moved faster than doctrine said was possible. He outmaneuvered opponents who thought they had him surrounded. But there was something more to his reputation among German professionals, especially the career officers of the Wehrmacht. Patton fought the way Prussian commanders fought. He was aggressive but disciplined. He led from the front. He demanded excellence. And crucially, he showed professional respect to captured enemy officers. German soldiers understood this. To them, Patton wasn't just dangerous, he was understandable. He was a warrior in the traditional sense. He fought with honor. One Wehrmacht colonel captured late in the war would later explain, "He fights like a real soldier, not a politician playing at war. He respects military tradition. He understands that soldiers are not politicians." This distinction became crucial. When German forces faced inevitable defeat, many soldiers wanted to surrender to someone who would treat them as soldiers, not criminals. And Patton, they believed, was exactly that man. The first incident, May 5, 1945. Near the town of Linz in Austria, an American patrol spotted movement ahead. A German rifle company, roughly 150 men, approaching under a white flag. Their weapons were lowered, non-threatening. An American sergeant ordered them to halt and disarm. The German captain commanding the unit raised his hands, but kept his rifle slung. "We wish to surrender," he said in careful English. "Then drop your weapons," the sergeant replied. "We will surrender to General Patton. Where is he?" The sergeant stared. "You're surrendering to the United States Army. Now drop your weapons." The German officer shook his head firmly. "We have traveled more than 10 kilometers to reach this sector. We passed British units. We passed other American divisions. We came here deliberately because this is Patton's army. We will surrender to Patton or we will not surrender at all." The American sergeant had no idea how to handle this. He radioed his lieutenant, who arrived confused and equally uncertain. When the Germans repeated their demand, the lieutenant escalated to battalion, who escalated to division, who escalated to 3rd Army headquarters. When Patton received word, his response was characteristically direct. "Tell them I accept their surrender on behalf of the United States. They can hand their weapons to any American officer." This message was relayed to the German captain. He considered it carefully, then nodded. "If General Patton accepts our surrender, then we accept, but it will be recorded. We surrendered to Patton specifically." The rifles came down. 4 hours later, they were being processed as prisoners of war. The regimental stand, May 6, 1945. In Bavaria, a German regimental commander approached American lines with roughly 2,000 soldiers under his command. Unlike the earlier company, this unit appeared organized and deliberate. They moved in formation, weapons properly carried. These weren't desperate men fleeing. These were soldiers making a choice. When a major arrived to accept their surrender, the German colonel made his position clear. "We surrender to General Patton. Is he here?" "General Patton is 30 kilometers away," the major replied. "You can surrender to me." "We will wait for General Patton." "Wait, that could be hours." "We will wait as long as necessary," the colonel said calmly. "We are a combat regiment. We have served with honor for 5 years. We deserve to surrender to a worthy opponent. We choose Patton." And they did wait. The entire regiment sat down in a field, weapons stacked neatly beside them, and refused to move until Patton could be contacted. When news reached 3rd Army headquarters, the situation escalated immediately to Patton. His instructions were immediate. "Send word that I accept their surrender. Tell the colonel his men have fought honorably and may keep their sidearms during processing. Tell him they will be treated with respect." When this message was delivered, the German colonel stood, faced Patton's direction 30 kilometers away, and saluted. "We surrender to General Patton," he announced to his regiment. "We surrender with honor." The weapons were laid down. The surrender was complete. Face to face, May 7, 1945. The battalion commander, a major with gray at his temples and a soldier's bearing, stood at attention when Patton arrived. The moment was tense. Hundreds of German soldiers watched as their commander faced the American general. Patton studied the man for a moment, then extended his hand in greeting. The German major snapped a salute. Patton returned it, a gesture that shocked nearby American officers. In conventional warfare, you didn't salute enemy soldiers. You defeated them. But Patton saw it differently. "Major, your battalion chose to surrender, but you chose to surrender honorably to a professional soldier. That shows judgment," Patton said through a translator. "You'll be treated according to the rules of war. Your men will have shelter, food, and medical care. Officers will keep their sidearms. You have my word as a soldier." The German major's eyes glistened slightly. He turned to his battalion. "Weapons down. We have surrendered honorably." 800 rifles were laid on the ground simultaneously. As they were being processed, an American guard heard a German soldier say to his companion, "We were fortunate. We surrendered to a real soldier. He understands what it means to be a soldier." The flood, May 7 to 8, 1945. Word spread through the fragmented German forces like wildfire. 3rd Army accepts honorable surrender. General Patton treats soldiers with respect. German units began appearing at 3rd Army's lines, not in small groups but in battalion-sized and regimental-sized formations, all with the same request. "Is this Patton's army? Will General Patton receive our surrender?" Within 48 hours, 3rd Army headquarters was overwhelmed. They were processing thousands of prisoners daily. The supply officers were stretched thin. The processing camps were at capacity. And every day brought more units specifically seeking out Patton's army. One German sergeant waiting to be processed explained his journey to an American interrogator. British forces were closer. We could have surrendered to them, but we heard Patton treats professional soldiers with respect. We heard he understands what it means to serve. So we traveled. Some of us walked for 3 days longer than necessary, but it was worth it. Better to surrender to an honorable enemy than a dishonorable ally. This became the pattern. German soldiers and officers were going out of their way, sometimes significantly, to reach Third Army lines. They were making a conscious choice about their fate. The SS question. Not all German forces wanted to surrender to Third Army. The SS and Gestapo, knowing they faced war crimes tribunals, generally tried to avoid Patton's army. They attempted to surrender to other American units or to British forces, hoping to blend in with regular Wehrmacht prisoners. Patton's intelligence officers watched for this specifically. When SS personnel were identified trying to hide their service, Patton's orders were clear. Separate them, document everything, and ensure they face justice. But this made a crucial distinction in how regular German soldiers viewed Third Army. Patton, they understood, recognized the difference between soldiers doing their duty and Nazi criminals committing atrocities. "I'm not fighting soldiers," Patton told his staff. "I'm fighting the Nazi regime. Soldiers do their jobs. Nazis commit crimes. One deserves respect. The other deserves justice." This distinction resonated deeply. It's why so many Wehrmacht soldiers specifically sought out Third Army. They believed Patton understood them, understood that they weren't all ideological fanatics, that many had simply been soldiers in uniform. A Colonel's Reflection, May 8, 1945. In a prisoner processing center, American intelligence officers were interviewing German officers. One colonel, a career Wehrmacht officer, veteran of both world wars, combat veteran of this conflict, was asked a direct question. Why did you choose to surrender to Third Army specifically? The officer considered carefully before answering. I fought Americans, British, Russians. I know how each treats prisoners. Americans are generally fair. British are correct but distant. Russians, he paused. We do not discuss Russians. But why Patton's army over other American forces? The colonel leaned back. Because Patton fights the way a real military officer fights. Aggressive, disciplined, professional. But more than that, he understands that a soldier is not a criminal. A man fighting for his country is doing his duty, not committing a crime. This distinction matters. When you have lost everything, your country, your army, your causes, all you have left is your dignity. Surrender to someone who respects you preserves something. Surrender to someone who views you as a criminal, even if you're not. That destroys what little remains. Patton preserves dignity. That is why we came. The strategic understanding. Not every American officer understood why this mattered. One young captain, frustrated with the constant German demands, asked directly, "Why should we care about their dignity? They're the enemy." Patton overheard this and intervened. "Captain, let me explain something. Those Germans could have fought to the last man. They could have scattered into the forests and become partisans. They could have fled east and tried to disappear. Instead, they chose to lay down their weapons and surrender. Every German who makes that choice is a German not shooting at us. Every peaceful surrender saves American lives. So yes, we treat them with respect. Not because they deserve it, but because it encourages others to make the same choice. That ends the war faster. That brings our soldiers home sooner." The captain nodded slowly. "Besides," Patton continued, "these are professional soldiers. They fought for their country. I can respect that even while defeating them. My enemy is the Nazi regime and the war it started. But the men in uniform doing their duty, they deserve the respect due to soldiers." Fleeing eastward, the Soviet factor. One crucial element drove many German soldiers toward American lines specifically: terror of Soviet capture. Stories had circulated through German ranks about Soviet treatment of prisoners, labor camps in Siberia, execution of officers, brutal conditions. Whether exaggerated or not, German soldiers feared Soviet capture far more than American capture. German forces retreating westward ahead of the Soviet advance were fleeing desperately. They didn't just want to surrender, they wanted to surrender to the West. Third Army, having advanced deep into Germany and Austria, was perfectly positioned to receive these refugees. Thousands of German soldiers were fleeing the Soviet advance and surrendering to Patton's forces. "We ran from the Russians," one German soldier explained, still haunted by the journey. "Days of running, no food, no sleep, only the fear that if the Russians caught us," he trailed off. He didn't need to finish. "When we saw American uniforms, we cried. We were safe. And when we learned this was Patton's army, we knew we would be treated fairly." Patton understood the dynamic perfectly. "Those men aren't running to us," he explained to his staff. "They're running from the Russians. I can't blame them. If I had to choose between American prisoner camps and Soviet labor camps, I'd choose American every time. And apparently, thousands of German soldiers feel the same way." The formal ceremony, May 8, 1945. On the day Germany officially surrendered, Third Army organized a formal surrender ceremony. It wasn't required by military protocol. It wasn't standard procedure, but Patton believed it was necessary. "These men fought honorably," he explained to his staff. "They deserve more than being herded into camps like livestock." German officers, unarmed and in dress uniform where possible, were assembled. The ceremony was simple but dignified. Patton addressed them through a translator, speaking not as a victor gloating over the defeated, but as one military commander acknowledging another. "Gentlemen, the war in Europe is finished. Germany has surrendered. You fought for your country. You did your duty as soldiers. You are now prisoners of war under the protection of the Geneva Convention. You will receive food, shelter, and medical treatment. You will be treated with dignity. We are all soldiers. We understand duty and honor. You have done yours. Now the fighting ends." German officers saluted. Patton returned the salutes. Watching American officers were astounded. They whispered among themselves. The commanding general was saluting enemy prisoners. Patton anticipated the question. "I saluted professional soldiers. There's a difference between the enemy and enemy soldiers." Managing the flood, May to June 1945. What followed was a logistical nightmare. Third Army was processing tens of thousands of German prisoners. Food, shelter, medical care, security, documentation, and eventual repatriation planning stretched supply lines to their breaking point. Supply officers came to Patton with concerns about resources. "Sir, we're running low on supplies. We can't maintain current prisoner treatment levels." "Then figure out how to get more supplies," Patton replied flatly. "We're not starving prisoners to make logistics easier." Security officers suggested harsher conditions to simplify guard duty. "Harsh conditions reduce escape attempts, sir." "We won the war," Patton said. "We can afford to be generous in victory. The men will be treated well." Word of Third Army's treatment of prisoners spread back through the German population. Families learned that relatives captured by Patton's forces were being treated fairly. This created long-term diplomatic benefits that neither side anticipated. Years after the war, a German newspaper published an article about American occupation. "Third Army defeated us militarily, but they defeated us with honor." That has not been forgotten. When Germany and America must work together in the future, this will matter. The letter, June 1945. In June 1945, Patton received a letter forwarded through military channels. It was from a German colonel, one of the officers who had surrendered to Third Army in May. "General Patton," it began, "I write to express gratitude for the treatment my men and I received as prisoners. We anticipated harshness. We encountered fairness. We feared cruelty. We found respect. You treated us as soldiers, not as criminals or conquered people. You acknowledged our service even in defeat. You gave us dignity when we had lost nearly everything else. For 5 years I fought against American soldiers. I contributed to the deaths of men under your command. By any reasonable standard, you should have shown me contempt. Instead, you showed professional courtesy. You treated me as a fellow soldier, not as an enemy to be despised. I will carry this memory for the rest of my life. When Germany rebuilds, and we will rebuild, we will remember how we were treated in defeat. We will remember that America, through your leadership, demonstrated that even enemies can respect each other, that honor and dignity can exist even in war. Thank you for showing me that such things are possible." The letter was signed by Colonel Friedrich Müller, formerly of the Wehrmacht. Patton read it 3 times. Then he filed it among his personal papers, where it remained until his death. He never formally responded, but he kept it always, a tangible reminder that even in humanity's darkest hours, respect between soldiers could persist. After the war, military historians studied prisoner-of-war statistics and surrender patterns across the European theater. They noticed something remarkable. Third Army received a disproportionately high number of German surrenders compared to other American field armies of similar size. Why did so many German soldiers specifically choose to surrender to Third Army? When researchers interviewed captured German officers, patterns emerged in the responses. "We heard General Patton was honorable," mentioned 156 times. "We heard he treated soldiers with respect," mentioned 134 times. "We understood he valued military professionalism," mentioned 98 times. "We wanted to surrender to a warrior, not a bureaucrat," mentioned 67 times. "We believed he would keep his word," mentioned 54 times. One military historian summarized the findings. Patton's reputation among German forces was complex and nuanced. They feared him in combat. He was devastatingly effective. But they also respected him as a military leader. And when defeat became inevitable, many German soldiers chose to surrender to someone they respected rather than someone they didn't. This is historically unusual. Typically, soldiers surrender to whoever is closest or whoever offers the best immediate circumstances. But in May 1945, thousands of German soldiers deliberately went out of their way, sometimes traveling significant distances, to reach Third Army lines. Many walked for days. Some traveled for weeks. This demonstrates Patton's unique standing among enemy forces. German soldiers viewed him not as a brutal conqueror, but as a professional military officer who fought according to traditional military standards. That distinction was crucial to understanding why they specifically sought him out. May 7, 1945. A young officer bursts into headquarters with an unprecedented situation. The Germans are surrendering, but specifically to General Patton. It made no military sense. Enemy soldiers don't get to choose their captors. They surrender to whoever captures them. But in the final days of the European war, thousands of German soldiers made an unusual choice. They bypassed British forces. They bypassed other American armies. They walked for days, sometimes weeks, to reach Third Army lines. They did this not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Why? Because in a war that had consumed honor, Patton represented something they understood and respected: a true warrior, a commander who fought aggressively but treated prisoners with dignity. Someone who understood the difference between professional soldiers doing their duty and ideological criminals. "We surrender to Patton, only Patton." These words, repeated by thousands of German soldiers in May 1945, represent something remarkable in military history. Even in defeat, Even at the conclusion of humanity's most destructive conflict, even between mortal enemies, mutual respect was possible. German soldiers respected Patton because he fought the way they fought, aggressively, professionally, with discipline and courage. And Patton respected German soldiers because, despite being the enemy, they were professionals doing their duty. When Patton heard that Germans were specifically requesting to surrender to him, his response captured something essential. Even the Germans have standards. It was a joke, yes, but it was also an acknowledgement that even in war, even between enemies, mutual respect is possible, that warriors can respect warriors across battle lines, that honor and dignity can exist even in defeat and surrender. That final month of the European War stands as a unique moment in military history, a time when enemy soldiers chose their captor not out of military necessity, but out of the belief that they would be treated honorably. And they were. WWII records maker, documenting the moments that defined a war.